There are growing concerns of corruption and maladministration in the higher education sector, including, of course, the University of Fort Hare. This follows an alleged assassination attempt on the institution's vice-chancellor and principal, Professor Sakhela Buhlungu, last Friday. Minister Blade Nzimande, the Minister of Higher Education, visited the institution this Wednesday, and this is what he said.
I also do want to say that in some respects what is happening here at Fort Hare is unfortunately developments that are taking place in other institutions. A few of our vice-chancellors have got protectors, bodyguards, and also in our Tibet colleges some of our principals have got protectors. Though the reasons are varied, but the common factor is that we do have the challenge of corruption that has crept into the post-school education and training institutions.
Professor of Practice at the University of Johannesburg, Mary Metcalfe, is listening in on that, and she joins us now to talk more about the scourge. Thank you very much, Prof, for availing yourself this afternoon. So according to the Minister, this seems to be far and wide, so it's not just limited to Fort Hare. What is your understanding of what is happening at institutions of higher learning? Can we put this down to mere corruption?
It's an interesting question. When you say mere corruption, one of the things that we've learned from the Zondo Commission, which of course was looking at state capture, but corruption was an enormous part of the findings and the recommendations. And this has been pointed out by the Minister himself, that the behaviors that lead to corruption are rampant in society, and this is affecting higher education as much as it's affecting many other sectors. Now, why this is such a critical issue is because from the public purse, the Department of Higher Education and Training disperses subsidies to public higher education institutions and to TVET colleges, and then they have to have the appropriate governance, management, administration, procedures to look after that public money in a responsible way. And there is a very large problem in the sector.
So to your point of this governance, management and administration procedures to look after this money, the Higher Education Minister broke down the budget that the University of Fort Hare has received, talking about almost $1 billion. Let's take a look, listen at that.
We have given the University of Fort Hare 282 million rands for infrastructure development by the university over a 5-year period. We have also given the university 288,920,000 rands between 2015 and 2021-2022 from the Sbusiso Bhemu Development Grant, whose aim is for the university to develop itself and build its own specialities and its own personality, if you like. We have also given the University of Fort Hare 130 million that was granted within a few weeks of request by the Vice-Chancellor in response to the dire water sanitation challenges in Alice for the development of the water and sanitation treatment plant. We have also given Fort Hare 122 million that was contributed to the creation of the Alice Student Village. We have also given the university 117 million rands, 976,000 for foundation provision over a 5-year period. In summary, we have given Fort Hare almost R1 billion.
Now, he further goes on to say that $500 million of that is still not used. So there's underfunding at the university. That wastewater treatment is not even done. So maybe a two-pronged question. On the amount of money that has been given to the university for these 5 years, that almost R1 billion, is that unusual?
No, it's not unusual. And what the Minister is talking about in that clip are additional amounts to the subsidy that is given annually. Now, the subsidy that's given annually is related to the number of students in the institution, and that's part of the enrollment planning from the subsidy. It's the operational expenses of paying lecturer salaries, etc. It's in addition to NSFAS. These 5 amounts that he is talking about are additional to the subsidy, and they are aimed at addressing some of the historic inequalities from the universities that we've inherited from the previous apartheid departments. So it's not only that 1 billion, it's also the subsidy, it's also NSFAS, and it's not unusual because the total budget for the Department of Higher Education and Training is 9.4 billion, and of the universities, each of them is getting the subsidy, and then depending on historic needs and current priorities, the department is giving this additional amount of money.
Okay. The second part of the question, Prof, is that you spoke of addressing historic inequalities. The Minister also made it known that this particular university has over 70% of its learners relying on NSFAS. Now, in my very simple thinking, I do then wonder, with so much money, yes, it is going to wherever it is needed, right? But we're putting these learners in debt, and they haven't even entered into the space of work. They're lucky if they will enter into the space of work. And so if so much money is available, in my simple thinking, I concede, then why are we also not looking at that, right? How are we proud that we have over 70% of the learners relying on debt to get them through school, yet it would appear, from my very simple understanding again, that there is some money that could potentially help these learners?
Okay, so I'm going to respond in this discussion in 2 ways. I'm going to think about what you're saying in terms of student dependence on NSFAS and repaying it, but I also want to come back, if there's time, to looking at issues of governance and administration and what the department is doing to address this widespread problem in universities. So firstly, the NSFAS is a huge component of our national budget as a whole, as well as a huge component of the budget of the Department of Higher Education and Training. There's a lot of discussion in the sector about if it in fact is sustainable. Now, your emphasis in the question on this is debt, but in fact the way NSFAS operates is that learners only have to repay the money when they get a job. So one of the challenges we face as a country is the transition of young people from university into employment. And the DHET is itself doing a great deal of work on that issue. Once a learner has employment, there is an expectation that they will contribute towards the education of others by repaying their NSFAS bursary, the NSFAS contribution. So rather than increasing NSFAS, we must, on its own, because it's already a sizable amount, what we need to be doing is improving the quality of what's happening at universities so that we get higher throughput rates, we get a higher quality of output. Part of that investment in quality is precisely what the Minister was talking about in terms of infrastructure grants, attending to water and sanitation issues, making sure that more of our students, when they are at universities, have a shot at achieving what they're capable of in greater conditions of equality than we currently see across institutions. But can I also talk about the
governance and administration? Please, Prof.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. You know, the problems of corruption and the problems of poor governance and the problems of poor management is a central concern for the country. The Minister did bring together a very strong team in 2017 which developed governance guidelines. Now, governance is the role of the University Council, which must oversee the work of the independent institutions of universities in terms of the academic leadership and the leadership in terms of administration and finance. The DHET declares every year what money it's going to be given to each of the university on the basis of enrollment planning. And then it is up to the council to make sure that that money is used effectively for the purposes for which it was intended, and that it's the auditors review. Now that requires the leadership of the vice-chancellor and the deputy vice-chancellors, but it requires strong administration with strong checks and balances, with procedures which look at, for example, conflict of interest. The DHET has found that there are many universities where university employees are themselves doing business with the university. Now, this all has to do largely with procurement processes. And it has to be a major thrust of government to ensure rigorous support for our institutions. I was very encouraged by the public statement that was made by a group of leaders, young leaders in society, led by, I think, Songezo Zibi, that was calling on government to ensure safety and security, but also calling on communities, calling on university employees to inform and declare when they see challenges. But I would also love to see the expertise that existed in that group of concerned citizens offering to support the development of appropriate management, appropriate administration, and supporting the effective governance. We've got so many fantastic South Africans who've benefited from the university education that's been there from before, but from 1994. And they should be saying, how can we help? How can we strengthen internal audit? How can we volunteer? And that is the way we're going to solve the problem. From DHET doing its work, Department of Higher Education and Training, and from these excellent people that exist and are concerned coming in to assist.
And the question then, Prof, becomes, are universities ready for that? We do hope to invite you again so we continue with the conversation, but unfortunately that's all the time we can afford for today. Professor Mary Metcalfe, Education Specialist. Thank you.